Dave Sneider. You are the co-founder of Lit Protocol. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me, Matthew.
Absolutely. Look, we were talking a little bit offline, and I'm very excited to talk to you about this. We have a lot of conversations that are happening contemporary right now when it comes to AI verification of data, of pictures, of videos. The White House is freaking out because Joe Biden's making phone calls in New Hampshire. Probably a lot of news agencies are wondering, how do I verify the data that I'm getting, for when it comes to resources in my news? So Lit Protocol is trying to tackle that. Can you tell us a little bit about your company, sir?
Yeah, so we're building a network. It's a distributed key management network. It's an underlying primitive. If we really think about like digital assets and digital ownership in an abstract sense, there's kind of two things that are required. One is digital signatures and the other is blockchains. And so what we have done is taken the design principles of blockchains, which is to make things distributed and fault tolerant and programmable, and applied that to the world of key management. Both keys for wallets, Lit acts as a base layer for dozens of different wallet products, and also encryption keys for conditional encryption. And that's where we've seen a lot of use cases of this underlying primitive at the intersection of crypto and AI, like in the example that we're talking about around content provenance and access control.
And just go into that a little bit more. Like, so what can a company do with this? How can a company use this? And what do you mean, like, access control? Just go into, because I think that we might have look, keys is nothing new in the crypto space, but I think how you use keys when it comes to, I guess, this bigger world that is now developing when it comes to creation, when it comes to images, when it comes to news, when it comes to video, when it comes to verification, that's a whole other thing that I think that we're trying to wrap our heads around. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. So, let's start at the base level, which is a key, a public-private key pair, often called asymmetric cryptography. And keys fundamentally have two features in them. And everybody who's listening to this is going to be familiar with these features. One is to sign stuff, like signing a transaction, the way your private key signs a transaction. The other use of a public-private key pair is for encryption. So if you've texted on Signal app, that uses keys for encryption. And so those are the two primary offerings that developers can use Lit Protocol for. So there's a number of use cases in both of those categories. On the signing side, teams are building wallet applications, bridges, oracles with Lit's programmable distributed key. And on the encryption side, the main use cases that are being developed are things like private user data, data marketplaces, and then also decentralized access control and licensing in this media context. And so I'll talk about one specific example here. Fox Corporation has put out and built a product called Verify. And Verify is an open media network. So in the Web 2 era, if you're a media organization like the Wall Street Journal, and you want to syndicate some content, you generate some content and you want to syndicate it to another media organization, you have to have a paper contract with them to decide, okay, cool, I'm going to license this content for you. These are the rules around it, the licensing specification, and there's an interaction between those two parties. What the Verify team has built out of Fox is the ability for any media organization to basically, when they publish, create an on-chain attestation of, hey, I published this at this certain date, which establishes the provenance and basically the authenticity, such that if somebody makes a deep fake of it later on, they can be like, no, look, we have this root truth. And then the second layer of it is really quite fascinating. That content in this product is then encrypted using Lit Protocol, and the encrypted version of that media then goes and lives on IPFS, on the decentralized open web in a private form. And then any other media company or LLM bot can purchase a license on chain. And when they purchase that license on chain, this is where the main use of Lit comes in the system, is that party, let's just assume it's media company B, wants to license and syndicate this content. They purchase that license by purchasing a digital asset. They prove to the distributed Lit network, hey, I now hold this license to read and use this content. Lit then will pass them the authentication and essentially the permission to decrypt that content in this distributed fashion, where that media company B connects to the network of the Lit protocol nodes. and then they can decrypt that content and read it and syndicate it. And what's so fascinating about this setup is that this can be done with all machine to machine transactions. And what we're starting to see, whether it's through Verify, and there's a few other teams that are building with Lit that are building these type of things, is a future of news whereby somebody wakes up in the morning and they type into their chatbot and they go, give me my daily report. And based on what they subscribe to, the LLM, the AI bot in the background, has the licenses, is decrypting the content, and then spits out, hey, here's your 60-second, now you're up to date and you know what's going on in the world, daily briefing, for example. And so it's just a really, really interesting and exciting kind of visionary take in terms of looking through the Web3 lens at media, which is to say, what is the underlying open protocol that all media organizations can use? And we're just so excited to be partnering with Fox Corporation on that specific product, because one of their requirements is this needs to be a distributed fault tolerant system. And so having the access control in terms of who can read and download certain articles, having that be a decentralized network and not a centralized custodian is really important in that design.
So this might be a stupid question because I just am learning about Lit right now. To be honest with you, with probably some people that are listening to this show right now, is Lit's protocol its own standalone, or are you operating off of say Ethereum or Solana or something like that? Or
Yeah, it's an excellent and important question. And so this is the fundamental understanding, and the unique thing about is Lit is key management. Those blockchains are state machines, and so if we and so it's its own independent thing, and it's also not a blockchain. It's key management. And so just to kind of like draw out the distinction between these two things as like the two core primitives associated with digital ownership, we can really go back to the founding document of this space, Satoshi's white paper. And the first sentence of the white paper goes, I'm paraphrasing here, goes, we need peer to peer cash. The second sentence of the white paper goes, digital signatures provide part of the solution, but we also need a method to prevent double spending. And then Satoshi goes and
mm,
spends the next 9 pages describing proof of
right.
work. But it really points at like the two fundamental primitives. So Lit is that second half of the coin, providing the digital signatures and the encryption, but in a way that follows the Web3 ideals of not having centralized custodians and being distributed and fault tolerant.
So, okay, I just want to finish up with this because I'm listening to this and I say, okay, that's great because now we have verification of news sources, data, and so on and so forth. However, how do we? The first thing I start thinking about is number one is you said who do you subscribe to? Is it Fox? Is it CNN? Is it whoever or whatever major corporations that is going to be providing this information to you? Maybe even Google, YouTube, so on and so forth. Um, who's going to have access to this verification? Is it just going to be the big companies, or is this going to kind of like piece out the independent for journalists? How would they compete on this level? So if I wanted to go to say, I don't know, to pick any independent media source and use that person that usually might not have these access to or want to pay for or can't pay for this, I guess verified data because you said it, they'll pay for the data, they'll get this permission to use it, the subscription or whatever you want to call it, the rights to it. This independent journalist seems now to be at a disadvantage. So now I have to watch this person and go, well, your data is not verified, or this is where are you getting this from, right? So that's the first
Right.
thing is this going to silo out like the independent people? The second thing is does that just make a I guess a funnel or a I guess a silo of data of what is now going to be verified? Does verified actually mean it's proper and better, or does it verified just mean that they now are saying that this is owned by somebody and I have the rights to use it, opposed to this is actually true and factual? So those are
I
my
think
two
it's
questions.
Yeah, I mean, true and factual. This is a longer conversation, right? Where in the post-truth era, there's like appeals to authority in terms of
Right.
this outlet versus another. But to the first point, I think it's actually the latter take, and I think like ultimately this product that Fox has built with Lit as this core access control component, and that's like one of dozens of use cases that people use this like the Lit network for. Um, it's an open system. And basically, like one way to visualize it is today, whether it's a media organization or an independent journalist, their content is like a little island. It's its own independent silo. What this Verify product is making is a totally open kind of data lake that anybody can contribute and read to from. So I think it actually does the opposite in terms of pushing out the independent journalist. It levels the playing field. It doesn't matter what your relationship is with any given corporation. It's just
Mm.
like everybody is has the same rules around licensing, and it's no longer who you know. It becomes much more meritocratic in that way, and that's one of the beautiful things I think about crypto networks, which is just the open interoperable capacity. If you have a great new LLM bot, you don't have to spend 2 years establishing media relationships. You can just apply it to this open network.
Okay, so my last question then. First, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time today. But I do have one last question that came out of this, and you said that it opens and levels the playing field. Why would anybody actually that is a big corporation want to participate in that? You don't more times than not, big corporations don't want to level the playing field. They want to silo their data. They want to silo their offerings. I mean, one thing we're looking at with AI right now is the silo that Google has. Google has even though they kind of messed up with Gemini the other day, um, they have access to a lot of data, a lot of visual, a lot of audio, a lot of transcripts from YouTube to email to Gmail to workspaces and so on and so forth. That they're not going to give away. They're not going to license that out.
Right.
They're not going to give you an API key. They're going to make sure that they keep that. So why would they even care about leveling the playing field with anybody? And second of all, is my next statement with that is I kind of feel that AI and legislation is going to go that way. We're going to see the regulatory capture on AI. We're going to see like Google lobby and say like, look, this is just too powerful of a technology to be in the hands of anybody. They can't handle this. The average person can't handle this. Only Google should be able to do this. So you're offering a democratic solution that I think that the corporations don't want. Why do you think that this is going to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we can zoom out here and the work that you're doing, the work that happens across YouTube, like there's totally a vibe shift, so to speak, in terms of how people establish trust, how people consume media. Certainly there's going to be old power holdouts. We see this in the media side, we see this in governments in terms of how they think about trustless peer-to-peer cash. These are stories that are going to unfold over the course of decades. But I think from a certain perspective, we're like already well into the process of the trust relationship between how people are consuming media, what currencies they're using, where they store their secret key material in the context of interacting with these crypto networks. And one way that I really think is really interesting to think about what's happening here is like Web3 and crypto, it's a back end revolution. Slowly but surely, more tooling, more sophistication is being built. We're playing a big role in that in the context of onboarding and wallets and access control with this distributed key management network. But like every month we get a little bit further. Every month we get a little bit further. And I think as an industry, we're going to get to the point where like we're going to reach true mainstream adoption, where people are going to demand from Google and from others, like, I want to own my own data. I want to own my own healthcare data. I want to own my own friends list. I want to own my own interest graph. Um, it still could be years ahead to get there, but I think that's the arc of history. And then the bigger companies eventually will just have to capitulate into the new systems if they are the things that individuals are using because they provide the 10x benefit for those individuals.
I don't know. I'm a little more skeptical than you. You seem a little optimist about this, and I think that the cat's out the bag for at least my generation. Hopefully, the new generations will be able to control their data and have some sovereignty over what is out there on the internet and who has control over it. But I think that at least my goose is cooked. Hopefully, our kids and our grandkids have different options, and I think we have to force them into that by regulation. To be honest with you, because I
Yep.
don't know if um, I don't know if the centralized and having everything out there, we see how we just opt into Facebook. Everybody opts into Facebook. Hey, log in with
Right.
Google, and that's just a sharing of data. So
So let me
we have to
give
have
you
a
an example. So like I agree that the shift happens when the end user, the consumer, gets a bigger benefit. So like let's take something super basic like search today, right? So search. most people use ChatGPT now. Some people still use Google. Search is evolving. There's disruption happening in a world, and this slowly but surely, this is starting to be built where people own their own data. You can start to reimagine what a 10x better search would look like. So, for example, today in search, you say, hey, what's the latest in crypto? You're going to get news, you'll get links back from Google, you'll get a description back from ChatGPT. In a world where we all have our data backpacks, where we all have user owned data, you can imagine a social element of search where I type in, like, what's the latest in crypto today? And because you and I both have our data as part of this system, where we've opted into this system in like a verifiable and private compute way, it may say, the search result may say, like, oh, David, you should really connect with Matthew from Daily Crypto News. And you actually have like a friend in common. And so just the leveling up of products is the thing that puts us there. The reason I maintain my like optimistic take here is this is just the nature of paradigm shifts. It's like it seems like impossible, and then everything shifts all at once. We've seen it with LLMs. We've seen it over the course of history and science. Like maybe not. Maybe skepticism is a better route, and we are heading for regulatory capture. But there's a lot to be excited about, especially in the world of open source LLM development. And frankly, I think it's important for people, looking at the Gemini news from yesterday, for people who want to have that control over what are the weights and what are the inputs in terms of the LLM models that people are using to dictate their lives, especially because the level of vulnerability that people are start to expose. Like if you have a bot that lives with you and is basically your guide and assistance in life, that bot is going to know more about you than even your closest
Right.
friends, maybe even yourself. And so to have control and sovereignty over that, such that you can't be manipulated to like be more angry, like in the example of Facebook in the last election, or like buy more stuff or care more about brands, and it's ultimately like control over one's own mind. So I'm optimistic. There's still years ahead in terms of like developing infrastructure, product experimentation. Um, but yeah, I'll plant my flag in optimism one more time.
Hey, look, I like the optimism. I am skeptical, but I am also I'm not here because I don't believe that there is a possibility for this future. I'm loving that you guys are building the things that you're building, and I really want to make sure that people take their data back. Still skeptical on how long that's absolutely actually going to take. David, thank you very much for coming on the show. Really quick, tell people where they can find Lit Protocol and contact you if they need to or want to.
Yeah, just litprotocol.com. We love meeting product teams and anybody interested in like social onboarding for Web3 wallets, private data, uh, verifiable compute, bridges, oracles, data marketplaces, licensings, and access control. We've invented a new primitive. We've been in R&D for the past 3 years. We just launched the V0 a week ago. Um, and yeah, it's a real good time. It's a it's an exciting community, and the types of things to build. And maybe this is where the optimism comes from that I feel about the future. Is just there's just so much kind of possibility and potential, and we're just seeing just such a wide range of experimentation. So yeah, we're on Twitter and Farcaster, and I'm on there too at David L. Sneider. And yeah, thanks again, Matthew, for having me on.
All right, have a good one.